You mentioned something that reminded me of a conversation you and I had last time you were here in Lake Nona
Yeah.
about certainty.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
and you and I see eye to eye on that. On this, we seem to get into these bandwagons, and it seems to be more pronounced today than at least in my lifetime, where we get into these bandwagons of this is the way it is, and then someone
Yeah.
else has a different bandwagon of this is the way it is, and this is certain, and the science here is settled, and or the science is not settled. And next thing you know, we draw lines in the sand, and then you got some people on one side and people on the other side, and we can't get anything done. Are you experiencing that in your world of longevity, or is it more of a collaborative type of environment where things are getting done?
I guess compared to the world at large, it's really not bad. But that's because the world at large is terrible when it comes to this. Um, and yeah, it's. But I mean, it's a funny thing when you look at the real heroes we should have. The people like, I don't know, an Einstein or a Carl Sagan, for example. Um, there was zero certainty from those giants. You know, there was just a childlike curiosity. So it's funny that the rest of us are so certain about everything. And like we were discussing, yeah, evolutionarily it makes sense, of course, that one person in our ancestors' tribe says there's a cliff. It is a cliff. I'm sure it's a cliff. Don't walk in that direction. But realistically, we learned that we don't know anything. Even if we touch a table, we don't really touch a table at a scientific level. The kind of the subatomic level, there's no such thing as touching really, and also our brain's wiring, and is it actually getting up a signal, or is it essentially there is nothing. We really should be certain of nothing at all. But the fact that we're certain of so many things and we disagree on the certainty, or even ourselves, I find it funny when I believe something to be true, and then 2 years later I believe something contradictory to be true. But I never question myself, I never kind of say, yeah, I wonder if I could be wrong, when clearly I was wrong on one of those two occasions. You know what I mean? We retain the certainty in spite of the circumstance. In this field, because you have scientists who are relatively good at using that method of interrogation and changing opinions, I think it's pretty good. You do see some slightly entrenched positions as to what something is and what it isn't, and how we test it, and so on. But mostly, it's a fairly open space, and I think it needs, again, from my limited, my absent scientific knowledge, but from observing, I think it is important that we make progress and that we work on the challenge ahead without getting too encamped into how we should progress, and that we should absolutely keep open minds to somebody coming in with some really lateral thinking, that it can move the needle in this even more fastly than everything we're doing at the moment, because reprogramming and other things have shown that.
So you mentioned also when you were talking about the blue zones, that study is to me is very fascinating because it it highlights the importance of community. You say
Hmm.
people's mindset is very important because they do things together and they support each other. They're there for each other. So the mindset aspect is a very important part, and I experience that myself. I try to do my best to have a community around me and to be an active part of that community. Are you finding in the work that you are surrounded by that things like mindset, things like meditation are of maybe great equal importance as the rest of the work that is being done, or is it still something that is a nice to have from the work that you're surrounded by?
Well, I'd break it into the two categories again. The real aging biology of aging research is over here, and then among all of the other things, that are current available lifestyle interventions. I think mental health is being given, I was going to say equal status, maybe not, but it's definitely something that people are, almost everyone is very aware of now as being very, very beneficial. And not just conceptually, but this is, there are biological markers that are measurable. And we know that stress, for example, has a role obviously in inflammaging, as it's called, and how much inflammation impacts on aging. And look, we've known this for forever. You can see someone going through a really stressful period in life, a bereavement or something, and you can see them age in front of you. In a matter of weeks or months, you look at them, and you go, Jesus, this is aged the person. So there's even visible versions of that stress and detachment and just not being well mentally that clearly has a biological impact. And just like yoga and stretching your body and things are really important as you get older, because you're losing muscle mass and so on. I think social connections, learning as you get older is immensely important. So getting the neural connections active and exercising those muscles is very, very important. And yeah, I think that's recognized. And I think even some of the protocols that are being developed by different, um, you know, clinics and so on, include a portion of mental well-being.
There's a school of thought along those lines that resilience is really the answer, right? Because like you said, the body knows how to do something very well, which is to heal. You get a cut, it heals. The body is always wanting to heal, right? And its ability to heal is directly related to its resilience, right? And its resilience is directly related to the ecosystem you built around the body. And that ecosystem is not just the physical ecosystem, but the mental ecosystem as well, and the spiritual ecosystem as well, right? So you have that triage of body, mind, soul, and having a continuous challenge, right? Of challenging
Yeah,
your mind, like you said, challenging yourself physically builds on that resilience. And I understand what you're saying that, well, yeah, there's the biology on one side, and then there's all these lifestyle things. But it seems like more and more that has gone from a relationship of correlation to a relationship of causality, right? Where we know now, like you said, from markers, and that if you do these things or if you don't do these things, these biological processes are observably and measurably impacted one way or another. And I think that if anything, that is a great success story of the movement. Is to go from there's a correlation. Well, okay, I prefer to see more of a causality relationship. Do you agree?
yeah, no, 100%. And sorry, I'm not trying to distinguish between mental and biological. I'm just trying to distinguish between all of these things that are in our current repertoire and the need to invest in more, stringent medical interventions that are on the horizon. But yeah, no, I do think that there's a lot of investment in this now in matching up biomarkers with stress management and with mental health. And now that we can do it, it's an obvious thing to do, because we want to track, like the reality of this whole space now is that it leans towards personalized medicine, preventive, and personalized. And so rather than someone having a specific disease and you giving them a specific drug and then measuring the impacts, it's kind of complex to take, because you're taking an N of one, you're taking Raphael, all of his biomarkers, all of his, omics, maybe also kind of some sort of psychoanalysis, coupling all of that together and then bringing in a whole repertoire of interventions. Um, and the real measure there isn't to get a drug approved. The real measure is to have Raphael feel and measure better as time goes by. Um, and absolutely part of that is going to be the mental well-being. And I think that's very understood. Um, and the technology keeps getting better really, really fast at that as well. How do we measure impacts? How do we assess? And there is a kind of a psychiatrist role in that as well. But how do we assess people's kind of ability to get into flow, to have a sense of purpose? There's a huge industry already in this for kind of C-suite executives or whatever. Performance-driven people is
Mhm.
already an enormous industry. They pay you know crazy amounts of money to walk through this part of life. How do they get into the place where they're resilient, but they're also dealing with stress the right way, and they're also very productive, and they're also family oriented, and all of these types of things. So there is a model there for the rest of us to look at, if we can get access to it, and it does fit well with. And like you say, it's not all about being perfectly content in a spa ad nauseum. You do need to keep. I think anyway. I don't have any support for this really, but I think you do need to be challenged in certain ways. I think a sense of purpose is something that's found. If you look at the Blue Zone analysis, that's found to be common. But the social element is really, really important. Like they don't live. Any of these people that groups of people, not individuals, because individuals will skewer this completely. You'll have someone that gets, a genetic lottery and lives to a very, very long age and does everything wrong, which is kind of what we find with most older people. But again, like people often highlight, they say, oh, this person lived at such an age and they smoked. Yeah, but practically everybody smoked in the 1950s when this person was a young adult, So again, I think we forget that time isn't happening just now. But yeah, I do think that what we do find from studying groups of older people is even more so than the having a sense of purpose. It's having a sense of community. Is my understanding is that they're very much respected. Their opinion is sought. They're seen as leaders regardless of the age, and they're involved. Like they're involved in the community's future. And again, yourself anecdotally, even with people that age, having a sense of future, having something to look forward to, having plans is so important. And it does challenge the nursing home concept. And I'm not suggesting that the facilities and everything else isn't very valid. And I'm sure there are centres where this is done from with totally different outlooks. But the idea that it's God's waiting room is can be if presented like that, can be really counterproductive.
Oh, I tend to agree with you. I think that there's better ways. In fact, I had a podcast a few episodes ago specifically talking about other ways to improve assisted living, specifically for that
Yeah.
purpose. We're running close to our time here, but I wanted to touch on something very important. You said, the
Mhm.
investment aspect of this process. Obviously, you've been in this for a while. You're the CEO of a Longevity Events Limited, company, and you're doing this Longevity Summit in Dublin. You've seen the investment grow in the space in 15 years, but like you said, nowhere near where it should be. What is needed to get to where we need to go? What are some of the things that you see we need to do collectively as a collective to get us to where we want to be from an investment point of view?
Yeah, I think an awful lot of it, funnily, is happening now. I mean, I know you can't be complacent, but it really. I was saying kind of jokingly to somebody recently that longevity feels like the Taylor Swift of the of the world at this moment. It's just everywhere. Every time you open something or look at something, there's a documentary or there's somebody writing an article on it. So it is getting into the public consciousness, definitely. And that moves policymakers. And policymakers move industry. Some it feels like it's the other way around sometimes, but if a government comes out, like the UK government came out a number of years ago, through very skillful management by Tina Woods and other, they came out and they wanted 5 additional healthy years by 2035, and they released a couple of 100 million. The couple of 100 million isn't really the thing that changes there, but what does change is everyone that's going to pitch an investor in the UK, I would bet, has that on their pitch deck. Even the government supports has committed. So you need kind of validation from groups, and public interest will lead, I think, to the politicians. Are normally followers rather than leaders, and they will follow public sentiment into something because then they have the confidence the public is going to support it, and away we go. Because this is, it's difficult for politicians to come out and say I support longevity. 3 years ago, it would be impossible. It's still somewhat difficult. Um, all of that, I think, is occurring, but I'm still worried about what is understood to be longevity in that context. Um, so if it's that we should stop smoking and eat better and meditate, we've known that for a long time. And we've done it to an extent. I mean, you could always do that more, but certainly smoking has been an enormous turnaround, from practically everybody, over 50% of people smoking, a lot of the countries we're familiar with. And that has dropped, precipitously in the last number of decades. So that's great, and that is absolutely a valid part of this story. But the more substantial interventions that we understand, um, theoretically and beyond theoretically in some cases, that should be targeting damage repair as a way to prevent diseases. That's a huge shift because that doesn't necessarily have an endpoint. Like if you prevent road accidents, right? So if someone dies in a road accident, a lot of us are familiar with how unbelievably tragic that is for the people involved, first and foremost, but then their families and extended communities, etc. If you prevent that road accident, that particular family doesn't come back and thank you because they don't know, you know. So the feedback on prevention is not as clear. So it is a more difficult message to sell in some ways than I have a drug that will cure you. Here you have a disease, now you have a cure. So we've got to get people to appreciate that they need to maintain good health regardless of their date of birth. And we need to find feedback mechanisms for that. And I think those are available. I mean, you know, we were discussing the last time I met you, Rafael, that I do a bit of running. I don't run very well, but everyone that runs seems to be around my age. None of us are going to the Olympics, but geez, do we love a PR, you know? And the PR is embarrassingly slow to people that are proper runners. It's a quick walk to those people, but to us, it's a huge thing. Now, how nice it would be to continue into your 50s and 60s chasing PRs rather than, like you said at the start of this, the understanding of the decline. So whether it's feedback like that as opposed to you are not getting Alzheimer's right now, your PR is getting faster. Maybe that's what moves the needle here. I'm not sure, but I think conceptually, prevention and damage repair is just one of the most important kind of pieces of thinking that we've had as a species almost. That it's bizarre that we didn't think of it before, to be honest. But I would say one other thing, like if I'm listening into this podcast and I have no knowledge of longevity or the science of aging, this sounds like something people have been talking about for thousands of years, and why now and why. To be perfectly honest with you, any superficial dig at the science will show you that, like 50 years ago, so sorry, 70 years ago, actually 70 years ago this year, we discovered the structure of DNA, and in 2000 we mapped the first human genome. Anything, if you go back a century or 2 centuries, to talk about disease management is nonsensical. It's like a mechanic telling you that they're going to fix a problem with your car when they don't know how to open the boot or the trunk or whatever you guys call it. You know what I mean? Like we knew so little about the body at such a basic level that of course we couldn't make progress on this any sooner. But it is a very 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 big complex system, but it is finite. And us and our little helpers, AI and computation, are making serious inroads. And like I say, conceptually, this notion of damage repair is so important. So that's a very, very long-winded answer. I appreciate, but I want to continue to kind of beat that particular drum. That yes, there is huge focus on longevity now. Money is pouring into it, which is great, but it's exclusively pouring into or largely pouring into the lifestyle intervention side of it. And a good chunk of that should be going towards basic research. Just like a good chunk of what we spend on healthcare should be moving towards, call it preventive medicine, call it whatever makes you comfortable to open your checkbook, you know. Um, but yeah, the real benefits for all of us as time goes by are to be found in aging research.
That's fantastic. No, I do appreciate that answer because it is comprehensive and it actually brings us, to a good ending point on the podcast. Thank you so much, Martin. Where can people find more about you and your work?
Well, at the moment, the LEV Foundation, I'm fortunate to work with the LEV Foundation, who do an amazing study currently, Robust Mouse Rejuvenation, which I should have talked about a little bit more, but people can look it up. It's the most important mice in the world at the moment. I think they're getting multiple interventions, and the story so far is very, very, very exciting. But there should be, like, not again. I shouldn't be, I suppose, using this as a call for money, but if I had nothing to do with it, I would still say conceptually, when we spend trillions of dollars on things, that we should spend a few million on projects like this. In any event, people can absolutely look at LEV Foundation. And the Longevity Summit Dublin, everyone is welcome. It's I'm told it's successful. There's no point, or that it's enjoyable. There's no point me saying that because that's a bit. But yeah, people seem to like it. It's a good event, experience. But also the science is accessible but top notch. Like it's literally the best people on the planet come to speak there. Thankfully.
Well, I look forward to partaking in that, for the next one. Thank you,
Yeah,
Martin. I know you're going to be back in Lake Nona soon, so I'm looking forward to catching up with you when you're back. Thank you
super.
for the work that you're doing. I find this not only fascinating but necessary, very important. So I thank you and your team and the people that you work with for all this work. And thank you for your time. And I hope that you have safe travels.
Cheers. Thanks very much, Rafael.